A couple questions. Gay Pride.
Sure.
Tell me about your very first Gay Pride and what was that like? Since we're in
Well,
Gay
my
Pride
very
month.
first gay pride was probably when I was about 4 or 5 years old because we
Yeah.
lived in the Castro district when I was a
Right.
child. And so we would just walk up in the floats and people would be dancing, and it seemed completely part of the fabric to me. It didn't seem weird or strange.
Today's guest is Christopher Rice, a New York Times best-selling author and executive producer of the upcoming shows The Vampire Chronicles and The Lives of the Mayfair Witches with AMC Studios. Together with his best friend and producing partner, Eric Shaw Quinn, he runs the podcast and video network TDPS, which you can find at thedinnerpartyshow.com. Their latest podcast is TDPS Presents Christopher and Eric, which posts new episodes every Sunday. In my opinion, Chris's books are excellent at genre bending, blurring the lines between hardcore suspense, thriller, mystery, supernatural, horror, and yes, even erotic romance. From Souls of Destiny, The Heavens Rise, The Vines, as well as Ramses the Divine, The Passion of Cleopatra, co authored with his mother Anne, to his Burning Girl series with the multi layered character Charlotte Rowe, just to mention a few, Chris's works have received immense critical acclaim and never fail in taking the reader on a wild and satisfying ride. Thanks, Chris, so much for being here today. I'm so excited to get to talk to you and learn more about what's going on in your life.
I'm excited to be here. I'm excited you will still talk to me now that you are a huge reality television star and not just our friend Lee, who we knew as a colleague and a fellow writer. So I'm just glad I make the list, the A list, if you will.
Yeah, no, far. I'm not on the A list, but yeah, even saying that I'm a reality star is still like sticks in the throat a little bit. It's like, no, not really.
Mhm.
I just happened to luck
Yeah.
out. I love my castmates and everything, but we're here to talk about you. And
Okay.
I just want people to get to know you, because there's a lot of layers to Christopher Rice that I don't think people
Mhm.
know. So I want to go back in the past and talk
Mhm.
about, because it is Gay Pride Month, and so I'm going to talk about some of that. But I want to talk about the move from San Francisco to New Orleans when you were a
Oh, wow.
kid. What was I mean, that's such a shocking, jarring thing, in my opinion. It would be. Was it? And what was it like?
Well, I don't talk about this very often, but it was presented to me under how did they say, false pretext or a false pretext. It was, oh, we're only going to move to Louisiana for the summer.
Oh
And so
wow.
we were keeping our house in the Castro district, which was this still there, beautiful gray Victorian, just 2 blocks down from Castro on Market Street, the center of the gay Mecca. We got in my father's Ford Probe, and we drove through Texas to visit his family, where you are currently, if you're still in Dallas.
I am.
Um, his family at the time lived out in Cedar Creek Lake, which is close to Gun Barrel City, if you've never heard of Cedar Creek Lake.
Know it well.
And we had this house that was just off Magazine Street, so adjacent to the Garden District in New Orleans, but not technically inside of it. And we were just supposed to live there for a year. And, I turned around and it was 15 years later at some point, and I was going off to college and we never went back. After a while, they said the move is going to be permanent. And I was not a fan. I really wasn't. It
Yeah.
was total culture shock. I went from a Montessori type school where we didn't have grades because they would have encouraged competition, run by kind of former hippies and flower children who were trying to put together the school they would have wanted their kids to have. And um, it was, we called our teachers by their first names. Our teachers were openly gay. And then I was picked up and dropped in an Episcopal school in the middle of a town that, despite having a reputation for eccentricity, still has some really conservative pockets in it, like everywhere in the South does.
Sure.
Um, and I couldn't wear t-shirts. I had to cut my rat tail. We were lining up to go to chapel in the morning. I just thought, this is a joke. I have ended up in the wrong place. But I felt that way about most things most of my life, so it wasn't really a surprise. But I did eventually come to love New Orleans and to have a life there. It's odd because it was 10 years old when this move happened. So the transition at 10, there would have been a transition of any type, because the school that I was attending that seemed so idyllic didn't go past fourth or fifth grade. So I would have had to go on to another school somewhere in San Francisco where we would not have been linking hands around the Capitol building to protest Ronald Reagan every few months, because
Yeah.
this was 1987, 1988. So something would have changed anyway. It just would have changed inside of San Francisco. But I can't complain about my life, but I can't say that move was easy either.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet it wasn't. I mean, just despite being in a creative family, you know, your father was a poet, your mom's a writer, your aunt's a writer, it's still the all the surroundings around you changed and the mindset changed because and that's still I think true today in the country. So
Mm-hmm.
fast forward a little bit here and let's talk about, if you don't mind, and if you do, just say so, about coming out to your family. How
Oh, I
how
don't mind
was
at all.
that? Yeah, yeah.
It
I'm throwing these
was
curveballs at you. I'm sorry,
No,
but
it's great because it's not the usual script that I'm used to in an interview. It's new and fresh, and I like it. I enjoy it. Thank you, Lee. I got a boyfriend, and until I was in a relationship with someone, now I use the term relationship really loosely. I was 18. We barely knew each other. His boyfriend had broken up with him to go out of town and become a poet somewhere, and all of this was doomed to fail within a few weeks. But it seemed real at the time, and it made it feel suddenly safe to come out of the closet slowly, piece by piece. I did it. I was very fortunate that my parents decided to take me on a senior trip to celebrate my high school graduation. And prior to this trip, I had started sneaking out to gay bars in the New Orleans French Quarter just to see, just to, you know, like
sure.
just because I like the music, you know.
Yeah, the toe in the water kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And I remember there are two really popular gay bars in New Orleans that are right across the street from each other, and they're still there. One is called Oz, and the other one's called Bourbon Pub and Parade. And I remember explaining to somebody that I couldn't go into both because I was bisexual, and only a truly gay person would go into both bars. It's like that's the level of how I was thinking about my
Sure.
sexuality at that point. So, but I met this boy, and I was really sweet on him, and it was my first dates with a boy and kissing a boy and doing other things with a boy. And I thought, okay. So we go, my family goes on this trip to Italy, it was just magical. And I wish, honestly, I had been more grateful and appreciative of it at the time. And the trip is like 3 weeks long. And as we're getting towards the end of it, I think part of me sensed that this relationship with this boy wasn't going to last very long. So I wanted to like get home and enjoy as much of it as I could. I went in, and this is how I decided to do it. I went into my father's hotel room and I said, I would like to go home early because I have a boyfriend.
Nice.
My dad
Nice.
looked up and was like, okay, is that what makes you happy? And I was like, yes. And he said, oh, okay, well, you can't go home early because there's really only 4 days left in the trip, and we're overseas. And this trip, by the way, was your idea. So get comfortable, but we're going to spend out the net, try to struggle along in this resort on the Mediterranean where we're making you suffer, and, pull yourself together. And so I did. And so for years, though, and then he told my mother the next day, and she grabbed me outside of a monastery that we were going to visit, how appropriate, and said, I want you to read my novel, Cry to Heaven, because my novel, Cry to Heaven, is about exploring the fullness of your sexuality. And, basically she was like, don't rush into a decision. She says, if you are bisexual, embrace it. Don't feel like you have to be pigeonholed. Now, at the time, I heard like the most sort of reduced version of that, which is like, I want you to be bisexual and not gay.
Yeah.
But my mother insists that there's more nuance to what she said in that moment. And so she got so sick of hearing me tell that version of the story on radio shows that, how like dad was so cool and mom was the one who grabbed me and made a big speech about figuring yourself out. She said, if you don't stop telling that story, I'm going to call into one of these shows. I'm going to say what your father said when you left the room, which is, I feel like I've been kicked by a mule.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which was not a great thing to hear, but it's one of those examples of there are parents who are truly homophobic, right? Who their kids come out to them and they say, this is a vile thing, you are sinful, get out of my house or whatever. And then there are parents who, and this may not be as true as it used to be, collapse in that moment under the weight of worry for their child, right? Who their head doesn't go to, I think you're an evil, wrong thing. their head goes to, if you are open and public about this information, you will be in danger from other people and I will not be able to protect you. And I think that was really the response that my father was having in that moment.
Yeah.
Like they had lost a lot of friends during the AIDS crisis. They had been in San Francisco when the pandemic started. There was a lot. They were deeply familiar with the gay community and gay people, but at the time they were familiar with what you were allowed to be by the mainstream if you came out. And so it's one thing to be accepting of that in your friends. It's quite another to see it
Yeah.
laid out as a path for your child.
Yeah. Yeah. I think any parent, even today, as many rights as we have gained since that time, it's
Mhm.
still, especially transgender and other parts of the world. I mean, uh, it's still a worry because their job is to protect you and keep you safe. And I'm sure no matter how progressive liberal they are, there is something in the back of their mind going, wow, this could be a difficult journey, at certain turns. So
Mhm.
I get it. I get it. Yeah.
Yeah,
What
and
would
to
you?
just to add on to that really quickly, because you made a good point, is I think the other side of it is how they react to that in themselves in the long term, right? Like I was boyfriends were welcome in the house, all that sort of stuff. They didn't actively seek to choke that part off. I mean, you can use that thinking that I described and go to a really bad place with it as a parent, but they didn't do that. I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's amazing, that you had that kind of experience. What advice, would you give? Because this show I get so many messages. I'm sure you did. You have gay
Mhm.
characters in some of your works. You get messages from young people. Hey, I'm struggling to come out. I'm thinking about coming out, or I'm struggling with my identity. What kind of advice would you give them today?
It's your decision to come out. It's a decision that you should feel free to make when you are in a place where you feel safe and comfortable. I am not of the opinion that somebody needs to endanger themselves in the interest of appeasing some larger ideal of everybody coming out immediately, no matter what. I think people are in different situations. I
Agreed.
think that what happened for me in a mild sense was that somebody else was involved. You know what I encourage people to do is stop. There's not coming out, and then there's not giving the false narrative, right? There's staying closeted, and then there's creating an identity that's completely fraudulent. Do not enter into a marriage with someone that you do not love and are not attracted to keep yourself in the closet. Once you pass over into the point where you're actually enlisting other people in something that is a tissue of lies, then it becomes a problem. And the hope for every LGBT person is that they can stop it before it gets to that point, or they can find a middle ground. But I can't, having been the children of very supportive parents, give well, I'm not sure what word I'm looking for. Let's say casual or freewheeling advice to other people about how and when they should come out of the closet. I think if your reasons for not coming out of the closet is because you think that there isn't a place for you in the community, that you are happier not doing you, that you will be happier if you never tell anyone this, that reason alone is really poisonous. But if you've got good evidence that you're a minor, and you're in a house with two parents that may be physically abusive with you if you come out, I think it's fine to wait. I think that the instinct that's always there for me is to encourage people to look to the internet for support, but there's also a lot of danger on the internet too, particularly for young people. And I think I discourage people from developing real deep relationships as young people with people on the internet about whom they don't actually know very much offline. But there are resources out there that were not there originally, online, reputable websites, reputable institutions, places like the Trevor Project, which has been around for years actually, but I think formed after I came out. They're there for people who are feeling suicidal impulses. There are helplines, but I'm always going to be about trying to engage with real people that can be supportive, because I just, like I said, I think the internet has some pitfalls and some dangers. And maybe that's just because I watch too much Dateline. But it is a deeply personal decision. And for some people, it does entail a fair amount of risk.
Yeah, I think I love what you said, and you kind of made me think about things I've been saying, because I have said find community online, but I need to couch that into don't create these personal relationships. And the Trevor Project, I've talked about that with several of these people that are dark. I think the big thing is there's no blanket answer for coming out. It's a very
There really
personal
isn't.
it's a personal issue. And really, I've had some that say I don't really know how I'm feeling, and I'm going, that's perfectly fine. Being questioning is perfectly a great place to be, and
Hmm.
wherever you're at, but be safe first, because there's parts of the world you come out, you could be jailed or even killed.
Oh
And
yeah,
there are
absolutely.
families that will kick you out at even as a minor and say you're not in this house. So think about your safety. I love everything you said, Chris. It was perfect. I mean, and
Thank you. It was pretty off the cuff, right? Because it was like the talking points didn't come up for me. When you asked the question the way you did, I thought it was really personal, because it's not, it's about what do you say to a person who reaches out who might be in danger. It's that's a different question than do you think
yeah,
and I do think there's an important distinction between talking about major celebrities who are afraid of missing out on certain roles if they come out, and talking about a young kid who's living in a hostile place where there could be, and I think the ideal thing, the thing that we hope for, is that the school administrators, and I realize I keep taking this down to the level of young people, but I think they're the ones that are most at risk around a lot of these decisions.
right.
Um, School administrators are hopefully getting better. At my high school, which was a pretty elitist institution, one of the guidance counselors told her child not to hang out with me because she suspected I was gay. Okay.
Wow.
So
Wow.
hopefully that was 1995 or 94, 95. Hopefully we're getting beyond that, and
Yeah.
so when the teachers and the authority figures recognize the struggling at risk LGBTQ, they can offer them something better than what I got,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was,
Exactly.
Now he of course
Exactly.
continued to hang out with me and ran and told me that she had said this, and I just
Yeah, of
stewed over it
course.
for 20 years. But still, that type of thing, there's a documentary. My best friend Eric Shaw Quinn, who wrote this book up here, Right Murder, on the
There
display
you
back there,
go.
he and I are we do a podcast called TDPS presents Christopher and Eric, and we are, in a few weeks, we're releasing an episode about a documentary called Bridegroom. I don't know if you ever saw it, Lee, but
I
I
have
highly
not.
recommend it. It was about what happened to a young man um, who got in a very committed, loving relationship with another man before the Windsor decision, before gay marriage became the law of the land, thanks to the Supreme Court. And it was about what the homophobic family of his partner did to him after the guy died.
Oh, wow.
And I won't go into the full expanse of the documentary, but we're going to talk about it in a few weeks on the podcast, and it's available out there to stream. It's a real history lesson now, for particularly for young people who maybe don't remember what it was like before we could get married. But there is a piece of that where one of the surviving half of the couple talks about writing a letter to a boy that he was in love with, that was not hypererotic or sexualized, but basically he confessed his feelings to his best friend, his romantic feelings. And his parents, the friend's parents, found the letter and used it to launch a campaign against this young person, this high school
Wow.
student. He was disinvited from trips. He couldn't go. They used their position in a church to do this to this person over a letter that just expressed romantic feelings. Um, my hope is that tone is starting to shift, and that will make it easier for young people to come out. But we've got people in their 40s and 50s who struggle with coming out. It's a very personal decision.
It's very personal. And I love that you and Eric are doing that, because I think that's part of pride too, is remembering the history of how we got here, because
Hmm.
it's not perfect yet. There's a lot of work still to be done, but there have been steps and improvements that we are standing on the shoulders of people that, have
Oh yeah.
helped move us along. So I love that you guys
I
are
mean,
doing that.
really.
I
Thank
want to
you.
talk about you and Eric,
Oh yeah.
because this friendship, I mean, I know of it and I know how tight you guys are. I don't know how it began. Can you tell us how you guys
Oh,
met and
oh, Eric,
how?
I would. You have to have Eric on to tell the story
Okay.
too, because he tells it so much better than I do. We were introduced by mutual friends because we were all from Louisiana, right?
Oh,
Originally, right?
okay.
I was from Northern California, but I grew up in Louisiana. And they introduced Eric without me to Eric without really telling him who I was or whose son I was or that I had published several books. They said, "This is Chris. He's a writer." And so Eric, who had also published novels, looks at me and thinks, "I don't know who they think I'm not getting this kid an agent. I don't know." I was young when we met. He
Yeah.
describes me. My ears get more jug-eared every time he tells the story. But so we made plans to meet for coffee, and he called my voicemail, and I think on the voicemail I said that you've reached Christopher Rice. And as soon as he heard the name, he was like, "Oh, I'm not going to have to get him an agent." So that was sort of the starting off dynamic, but we've become much closer over the years, and we've become business partners, which is not always possible for good friends, but it has
Right.
been possible with us, and I'm grateful for that. And we launched the Dinner Party Show as a website and originally a live streaming internet radio show some time ago. All of those shows are available as podcasts, and we were working on other projects that pulled us away from doing a live show every week. And we decided to return with a podcast that was more talk focused, but also true crime focused, and often true crime focused with a LGBT perspective. I like to say that we do a regular series that's part of the podcast called Christopher and Eric's True Crime TV Club. And there has been more than one occasion where we have watched, we watch an hour of television typically, or a documentary, and it ranges from prestigious documentaries to Wives with Knives.
Okay.
We will sometimes hear the gay story that they are trying to erase. And Eric is particularly good at it because he's older and he's got a long history of watching and witnessing what gay erasure looks like, particularly in the media.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting for that reason, but it is sort of about inviting people into our friendship. You kind of nailed it there. It's like we are doing the podcast all the time, as Eric likes to say. It's like we just hit record for an hour
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
week.
And just start
Yeah.
talking like you're at the dinner
Yeah.
table. I love that. It's what
Totally.
I like about you, about your friendship. Something unusual happened with me being on the circle. Courtney and I have become very close friends, and there's this generational difference. It's much wider than you
Mm-hmm.
and Eric, but I love seeing that, because a lot of times you see people that are drawn to very like-minded and age, experience, everything, and it's kind of like these little clusters. But Courtney and I have become so good friends, and he helps me kind of navigate the current world. At
Mm-hmm.
30, he's 30, and I'm 58, and I'm saying, oh, okay, here's the old
Right.
man version of it. And
Yeah.
how is that intergenerational divide work with you? Is it like nothing?
No, it's key. It's key. You're reminding me of something that happened just the other day with us in the car, which is I said to him, he had been suggesting that I try this hairspray that he recommended, because I'm reaching the age where, it's not cute to just let it lay flat anymore. It
Yeah.
doesn't fall into like a Matt Damon side part, right? I'm in my 40s. It needs a little work. So he'd been recommending this hairspray forever. And I was like, hey, old man, I got my finishing spray right here. And so I finally decided that the spray I was using was just crap. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to buy it on Amazon, and it comes and I use it. And I said to him in the car, thank you for recommending that hairspray because it's really doing a great job. And he said, you should really just listen to me more. And I was like, okay. But he said, the reason I say that is not because I'm a genius, but because I'm old enough to have done everything wrong several times. And when I tell
Yeah.
you what to do, I arrived there by a trial. What is it?
Yeah.
Process of elimination,
Yeah.
right?
I've
That's
gotten
that's
some
what it's
bloody
about.
noses,
Right.
black eye here and there, but yeah, I know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I didn't just figure this out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I will say from my vantage point with Courtney, and I've always said this, I have mentors of all ages because I do not know everything. In fact, I know a very minuscule part of what the world has to offer, and so I
Yeah.
I take advice from everybody. And I think having listened to the podcast, I know Eric does the same.
Hmm.
You are one of his mentors as well as him being
Mm.
your mentor. I'm sure. So I
Well,
love
I
it.
think the key to aging is to remain teachable. I think it's really important to remain teachable, to admit that
Yeah.
there's not you're never going to know everything.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right, I want to move into writing a little bit here.
Hmm.
You've had a lot of success on your own, done a lot of things, but you wrote with your mother, which I have
Mm.
written with my mother more than
Oh,
one
you
book.
have?
Oh
That's
yes.
great. I didn't know
Yes.
this.
Yes,
Oh.
yes. Yes. And so um navigating the creative differences between a mother and son uh,
Mm.
has been interesting. We've written, we put her name at the front of two books that she wanted to do, and me. Sometimes she ghosts, whatever. But we've done several books together. Tell me
Hmm.
about that process with your mom. Do you have to navigate certain creative differences, and how does that
Oh,
work?
yes, absolutely. There are huge creative differences between us. Now, book wise, we have worked together on sequels to a book that she wrote years ago that was very popular called The Mummy or Ramses the Damned. And uh, in some ways, that made it easier because rather than inventing something together out of whole cloth, I was plugging myself into a world that she had already built. So it wasn't as their fights were not as numerous because she had the trump card. Like she had invented this world, this
I was,
atmosphere, the mood,
yeah.
the characters, they were all predetermined. Now, there were characters that I was allowed to really develop and bring in who were new to the second book, which came out a few years ago, called Ramses the Damned, The Passion of Cleopatra. And that was exciting. But if she and I were to sit down and try to write a detective novel together, that would be very interesting and very different from what we have done previously because our approaches to that genre are very different. So I don't honestly
Yeah.
know how well we could do it. I don't know. There's a lot to navigate, but I've enjoyed the experience so far. And I've enjoyed, from a business perspective, right? If your books are successful, publishing professionals will want you to just do that over and over and over again. And what you might lose sight of is that as a writer, it is actually a testament to your skill if you are versatile, if you can go in different directions and do different things. So if you have an opportunity that actually pays, that allows you to stretch yourself, expand yourself, to do something new, it's really fun. It's something to be grateful for. And I'm grateful for this. And I think, it will continue.
I would love for you and your mother to write more of where you have been the expert. And
Mm,
because I will tell you that what my mom, this is my little free advice to you, take it or leave it. What my mom and I do is we always say there is sort of the one who has veto power, and that's
yes.
the originator of the idea. That's how we kind of came up with it. Now, believe me, if you're wanting to take a certain turn, we may really get in there and duke it out and say why
Hmm.
this is the reason. But the veto power has, for me as a collaborator, has to rest with one person. It has to, because
Yeah.
you could get it. You could really be stalled for a long time,
A
especially if
long
something
time.
critical. Yeah, yeah. But it's just
Well,
a piece of
Stephen
advice.
Sondheim said, whoever's the most passionate wins in his
Oh,
collaborations, which is like,
I like that.
that can be with the Rices, that can be hard to tell. There's a lot of passion to go around in the Rice
Yeah, I
family.
was gonna say, with I
Yeah.
like the idea, but my mother, when you look in the dictionary under the word stubborn, her picture's right next to that definition, and she probably can hear
Right.
me say that.
She's
But
like what is the statue of the little girl on Wall Street that's like putting her hands out? Yeah.
yeah,
That's your
yeah,
mother during the writing process. You
that's
shall not pass.
you shall not
Yeah.
pass. Exactly, exactly. Well, I want to end on a couple questions. Gay Pride.
Sure.
Tell me about your very first Gay Pride and what was that like? Since we're in
Well,
Gay
my
Pride
very
month.
first gay pride was probably when I was about 4 or 5 years old because we
Yeah.
lived in the Castro district when I was a
Right.
child. And so we would just walk up in the floats and people would be dancing, and it seemed completely part of the fabric to me. It didn't seem weird or strange. This was my neighborhood. This is where I lived. It's very strange to start your life in such a liberal place and then be taken later to a conservative place, and a conservative place with a lot of racial segregation, not legally enforced, but evident in a lot of different structures in ways that it was not in Northern California when I was a young child. It feels like you're going into how most of the country seems to be organized, but it's like it's the reverse of most people's journeys, which is that they often grow up, or in a lot of people's journeys, where they grow up in a conservative sort of cookie cutter place, and then they go to some big, edgy, complicated city later in life. Well, I had the reverse.
Yeah.
And then I moved to LA, which is just completely weird in a variety of different ways. So up the street, literally 2 blocks up the street from our house, was the Gay Pride Parade. And I went very frequently. As a grown-up, it was, as somebody coming out of the closet, it was a completely different experience, probably because I had had those years of repression in the interim.
Yeah.
And I remember I wrote columns for The Advocate for a while, and I wrote one about it that I would maybe need to revisit. I was pretty young when I wrote it, and I'm not sure I agree with everything I said in it today, but I think the thesis of it was basically, it's not possible to come up with a single celebration. And when I talk about celebration, I'm really talking about a literal parade, right? Something that rolls down the street that is going to please absolutely everybody in the LGBT community, right? It is possible to create something that invites all of them to take part in some way, but the end result may not 100% please all of the participants or all of the attendees. But that's no excuse not to include inclusion. Okay. The thing that I think introduces a lot of anxiety around it for members of the community is, what does it look like to people outside of the community, and how much value should we put on their opinion of it as opposed to our engagement in it? And I would say less. I would say less on what people outside the community think and more about how we relate to it ourselves. I think that there is a journey underway. It's a long journey of identification on the part of the LGBT people with something beyond just nightlife and highly sexualized environments. And it's not about enforcing puritanical codes of conduct on anyone, but it's about having a social space where everything, as Eric often says, doesn't feel like a swimsuit competition. And I've got a place at the table, even if I don't have an 8-pack, or I'm not a man or a cisgendered man. I think that that's an ongoing journey, a greater racial diversity in pride celebrations. All of these things are happening, and all of the fact that all of these discussions are taking place is just more proof that it's still an essential thing in some way. But, I have borne witness here in West Hollywood, where I've lived for probably longer than anywhere else I've lived now, to this. What is this celebration going to be? Is it even in the right part of town? Should it be in a place that's a little more working class, more racially diverse? And it's ongoing, and I don't see any easy answers, but I can tell you that during the COVID pandemic, the absence of an actual celebration was missed. It was absolutely the right decision, but that absence from the literal map of the city was felt by me. And I don't often attend the parades because I don't really like being outside, to be frank.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert who stays at home and makes shit up. Excuse me. But I think this is the thing, that watching this year, there is something about this year. More people are talking about it. More corporations, whether they should be or not, given their donation records, are going all in on it. I'm turning on my streaming device and seeing Pride Month selections curated for me. For me, as a young man first coming out in 1996, this would have been unthinkable. Unthinkable. Pride was a traffic problem for a large city in one part of town, and people said mean things about it under their breath, unless you went and were literally part of the immediate celebration. But the fact that it is spread out all over is, to me, it's really encouraging. But that's not to say that all these questions have been answered. I think one of the more disturbing things that happened recently, and this actually wasn't recently, but there was a belief right after I think it was the Windsor decision, when gay marriage became the law of the land. A lot of gay rights organizations took the attitude of like, well, okay, we're done.
I
And
know.
trans people were like, whoa, and
Yeah.
black people were like, whoa, like, wait a minute, like,
Right.
we're not done. And but there was a lot of really moneyed, well-heeled organizations, particularly in big cities, that thought this was our only goal, and now we've got it. And there was a kind of fragmentation that happened in the political donor class of like, well, I'm more conservative, I don't really, if you're going to go in that direction, I'm going to go over here. So this is almost like, it feels like a bit of a realignment, and a lot of it's happening around conversations and celebrations of pride.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And the big thing that my big takeaway from what you said is what's outside, to me, less focus on it.
Mm-hmm.
That was when you said that statement, it just hit me right in the gut. I go, yes, this is about
Mm-hmm.
us and about our decision and how we all move forward and work together. We're very diverse inside this coalition. I mean, we really are.
Mm-hmm.
But let's come together and figure out what's good for us on how to celebrate pride, on how to move forward. But yes, the trans community, I mean, the gender fluid, I mean, there's so many people and so many rights that still are being stomped on. We can't give up the
Mm-hmm.
fight. We can't take this sit back and sigh of relief and we're here. No, we're not here. We're in a
Mm-hmm.
step in that direction. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I love it. Great, man, great conversation. Okay, couple more things, and I'll let
Yeah,
you go.
sure.
We've gone
No,
longer
I'm
than I
good.
thought. Um,
That's fine.
per- Personally, because that's another thing. Even cisgender men and everything. There's this sort of Steve and I've been together. It'll be 33 years in September. But there is being
Mm-hmm.
happily single. There is all kinds of different relationships that I think we should all accept. But where are you in the See, this is getting a little juicy here.
That's
Where are
fine.
you in the relationship thing? Are you seeing somebody, or are you happily single? Are you looking?
Well, I haven't been doing a lot of dating during the pandemic, I'll say that
Yeah.
much.
Okay.
I was really strict. I mean, already Eric and I like to joke, our lives didn't change much because we already work from home and are sort of socially introverts. Like a movie night at somebody's apartment is a huge deal for us. So there's that. I had reached a point in my life where there were several years in there where I really believed, whether this had been messaged at me or not, or this was about some old tape that would play in my head from childhood, that if I didn't have a partner or a very serious boyfriend, I was deficient. And I think there was a thread of homophobia running through that. Like I
Hmm.
could be an okay gay if I was a married gay.
Yeah.
And I pursued aggressively a relationship, often with people who were not suited to the job. And what I mean is not a match for me.
Right.
And arriving at a place in my life where I could say, Eric's got a line about growing plants on his balcony. He's got this beautiful balcony on his apartment and he grows these amazing plants. But he says, the way I do it is I get the plants that are right for the balcony. I can't get a balcony that are right for the plants I love. I have to plant. This is how the sun shines on my balcony, is how he puts it. And it's a great metaphor for a lot of different things. And the belief that I had to turn myself into a different person to try to fix it or force it with someone who wasn't a match for me, and that I could maybe sit back and let the universe kind of play its own role in this,
Hmm.
um, was important. I mean, I think that there comes a time where people who are in relationships in a very loving way want to get everybody in a relationship, and what they often believe is that they just made it their objective and they accomplished it. Well, more often than not, what's happened is that they actually met somebody they fell in love with, and they're very lucky. And
Yeah.
that doesn't happen to everybody. And so sometimes when they're talking across the table at someone who's single, they'll think in their head, oh, well, you're just difficult, or, you need to lower your standards, or all this sort of stuff. It's like, or you could have, cherish what you got if it's worth anything, or if you've just been telling me a story about how good it is. and recognize that it doesn't unfold for everybody in
Right.
quite that way. So, like there are a lot of people out there who get into placeholder relationships, maybe less in younger generations based on the articles that I'm reading, because it's an expensive proposition for millennials to be in a relationship and all that sort of
Sure.
stuff. Share your money with people. But for me, it was about being willing to accept that I could be happy even if it never happened, which is a big thing. And when it was first proposed to me as an approach or an idea, I was not open to it. I was
Mm.
not open to it. But with Eric, there were a lot of conversations about it. Eric is also somebody who's single, where it was like, I'm not going to just create. It gets backed on some level to this idea of how much of this is about what other people think, right? How much of this is about how I'm being perceived by other people, and so it's been liberating. I still date and have a good time and do this sort of stuff, but I'm not in this mad rush to get married.
Yeah, I love everything you said. That's why I call people happily single, because
Yeah.
there's happily married, there's happily single, there's miserably married, you
Hmm.
know, and that may be the more than not, to be
I think
honest.
that's the norm. I have to say, there are a lot of friends of mine who have given me really fiery lectures about how I must be married. And I look at their relationships and think, not to your husband, sweetie.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been at a party with you. I've seen how you've acted. No.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. No, I think
totally.
that I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Is there anything you want to talk about? Any projects you're working on? Anything? I know we talked about the dinnerpartyshow.com. We want people to go to that. What else? Where else can they find you and that kind of thing?
Well, ChristopherRiceBooks.com is my website. I'm on Facebook. I'm more active on Facebook and Instagram. What am I on Instagram? I should be able to answer this question. I'm going to answer this question right now. And I always forget, because I had a sort of, I had an account. I started an Instagram account years ago, Christopher period Rice period writer on
Okay,
Instagram. And
good.
I'm available in those places. And yeah, I worked on a lot of books during the pandemic, and it looks like they're all going to come out next year, like boom,
Oh
boom, boom, boom,
wow,
boom. So
wow.
people are going to think that I'm like so productive, but really it's there's going to be a lot of content backlog for a lot of creators that it
Oh
just
yeah.
wasn't the right time to reduce it, or it got delayed. So I have a thriller coming out next year from Amazon Publishing, and I've got some other stuff I can't quite announce yet, but I'm
I
very
gotcha.
excited about. And the new episodes of the podcast land every Sunday. Christopher and Eric at thedinnerpartyshow.com.
I love it. I love it. Please tell Eric hello for me. And
I
thank you
shall.
so much for being on here. You've been an awesome guest. And hopefully, I'm actually thinking about going to LA in a few weeks. So if
Oh,
I,
come out and visit.
maybe we can get a cup of coffee, get you out of the house,
That
you
would be great.
introvert.
Only for you, Lee. Only for
Okay.
you will I leave the house. You and Gay Pride.
There you go. All right. Thanks,
Excellent.
Chris.
Thank you.